At least that's what I think.
Annette wants to do it this week because she's.
Oh, was it you?
No,
It's you
that's not
tonight?
true.
Okay. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Welcome to the meeting of the North Ogden City Council. Appreciate you being here tonight. Glad to see so many of our scouts here working, I'm sure, on a merit badge. So we're happy to have you with us. We invite everyone to please turn your cell phones off or put those on silent during the meeting. They don't interrupt us. And then we'll begin our meetings, as we always do here in North Ogden City, with an invocation and pledge of allegiance. John Call, our city administrator and attorney, we've asked him to give the invocation, and then Senior Patrol Leader Kyle O'Driscoll will be coming forward to lead the audience in the Pledge of Allegiance. So, Mr. Call.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we're grateful to Thee for this day and for the chance we have to gather and to talk about the issues in our community and to discuss the options that are best for our residents and for us as a city staff and leadership. We're grateful for this beautiful earth, for the chance we have to live in this country, and for the many freedoms we enjoy. Please be with those who are protecting those freedoms and standing up in the face of injustice. And we're grateful to Thee for our leaders and for the service that they give. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Okay, Senior Patrol Leader.
Will the audience stand? Please repeat the Pledge of Allegiance after me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. We have first on our consent agenda one set of minutes from October 17th. Is there any discussion on those minutes or any corrections?
Mayor, I'd move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to our active agenda now. First item, as always, is public comment period. If there's anything, ladies and gentlemen, that you'd like to share with the City Council on any of these agenda items, we invite you forward, or on any other item of city business. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on, but there will be another period at the end of the meeting as well if anything comes up you'd like to comment on at the end of the meeting. Up first, we have a very important report on the city's financial status. We've had the end of the fiscal year. North Ogden City operates on a fiscal year from July 1st to June 30th of the following year, so half of one calendar year and half of the other. That's the year for our budget. So our budget, most recent budget, ended on June 30th of this year, this summer, and our finance director has prepared a full report now that all of the outstanding items, or hopefully all, or at least most of them, have been turned in, and we're kind of closing the books on that fiscal year. And I'd like to welcome our finance director, Mr. Evan Nelson, who will be giving the council a presentation on the end-of-year financial report. If you have a smartphone and would like to follow along, this is posted on the city's website. All of tonight's agenda items are at northogdencity.com. If you go to agendas and find city council agendas and tonight's date, you can see all of the documents that we'll be displaying up here as well. So Evan, welcome to talk about the fiscal report.
Thank you, Mayor, for the introduction, and good evening, City Council. We are currently in the midst of our end of fiscal year audit, and as we get to the end of the fiscal year and for the following months, we do a lot of year-end closeout entries into the books, and as we prepare for the audit. So most of those entries have been done. There are likely to be a few more as we complete the audit, but we have it to a point where I felt like it was worth coming back to the council and presenting, so you could have the information for the fiscal year. You can see how things went, and we can talk about questions or ideas for improvement that you might have. Let's start with sales tax. In the report, there's a graph there that shows the sales tax trend. As you know, the economy in Utah has been very strong. The economy in North Ogden has been very positive. And so we have $2.5 million that came in during the fiscal year in sales tax revenue, which is 3.3% higher than our projections, or $82,000. So that was really positive. When you compare that to the previous fiscal year, we're actually 8.5% higher, or $200,000 higher than the previous fiscal year. So that's all good news. The next graph down, John, do you have this sheet? It should have been posted on the website, I think.
Okay, let me find it.
If not, that's okay. But the next graph down is our revenues and expenditures. We're comparing revenues to expenditures by fund, and we can look through and see how each fund has performed for the year. First, I'd like to highlight we have several different transportation funds: the utility fund, impact fee fund, transportation sales tax fund. And those funds, really, you can't see any expenditures showing up, which is because we're collecting that revenue and saving the revenue for future use on the intersection and Washington widening project. So you can see how those revenues have come in. Transportation impact fee came in significantly higher than what we had budgeted. So those are positive trends. There were a couple of funds where the expenditures exceeded revenues, and I wanted to talk about those. Let's see, in the stormwater fund, the graph shows that expenditures exceeded revenues, but that was due to a transfer of money out of the fund when we established the new the new stormwater impact fee fund. So about $470,000 was moved out of the stormwater fund into its own fund so that those dollars could be kept separate from the non-impact fee money. The motor pool fund shows expenditures exceeding revenues. You'll remember in the last maybe 3 months ago, we made a change in our asset tracking policy where we only capitalize assets that are valued $5,000 and higher, whereas before it was $500 and higher. So that was a significant change to the way we track assets in the city. And because of that change, quite a few assets in the motor pool fund were eliminated from the list and the value that was associated with those. The assets are still with us, but for our financial reporting purposes, those were eliminated from the list, which caused us to report an expense on our books, even though there wasn't a true transfer of cash. So because of those financial reporting requirements, it shows as expenditures exceeding revenues in the motor pool fund. Then the other one is the police motor pool fund. And the expenditures showed higher in this fund because our estimate of depreciation was much lower than what it ended up being. So we'll take that into account as we formulate the new budget and have a better estimate in our future budgeting. The depreciation expense, though, again, is not a cash transaction. It's reporting an expense that belongs in the fiscal year, even though the money for the asset has already been spent.
So on the CDA fund, talk to me about that. We show revenue. Where'd that revenue come from on the CDA fund?
It's a loan from the RDA fund.
'Cause I knew we didn't have any money in the CDA.
Coming next year, though. It's our last year. It's an automatic trigger for next year, so we'll start collecting property tax increment next year.
How much of a loan was it?
It was $200,000.
And that was for this thing here on Washington, right?
The strip mall project. The CDA's contribution to that redevelopment. And that loan was discussed in council meeting and part of the budget amendment process.
How long do we expect it'll take to have that paid back?
Mayor, do you have an idea on that?
I would expect within 3 years. Kind of depends on the pace of development of Village at Prominence Point. That's the biggest project in the CDA. So if it's moves forward with some rapidity, probably sooner, because there'll be more increment. If it goes a little slower, there'll be less increment. But that project will produce a lot of tax increment because it's going from raw ground to high value townhomes, apartments, and commercial. So there'll be a lot of tax increment there collected.
The third graph on the page is...
And can I piggyback one thing on
sure.
that second graph? It's not an Evans report because this is brand new data I got today from the Aquatic Center, but I just wanted to share it with you, council members, and I'll email this out to you as well. The Aquatic Center, which is the second chart, and we've of course had instructions from the council to reduce as much as possible the subsidy from the general fund for the Aquatic Center, and I wanted to report to you that they've done a great job this year. It was the first year in the history of the Aquatic Center that revenues were over $400,000, and also expenditures were controlled to the degree that 90.6% of the operating costs of the Aquatic Center were covered by revenues, also the first time over 90%. It was 85% just a couple years ago when we started having this discussion. So that's the operations. That does not include the bond, I want to be clear, but the operations of the Aquatic Center are almost 91% being covered by the revenues at the Aquatic Center, which is a great step forward that the council had wanted to happen. So I'll email you the details on that, but great news as well that our management, Tiffany, and the crew there, Nigel, the Aquatic Center manager, are really doing a good job in controlling those costs, and we hope that will just keep getting better and better to eventually we'd love to see the Aquatic Center pay for all of its operational expenses.
That is good news. So the third graph is general fund expenditures shown by department. So you can see there that all the departments except one show that they're below budget. But I'll give an explanation on the building department. We had a couple of employees retire in that department effective in the new fiscal year, but our accounting rules required us to report the expense of their retirement leave payout in the previous fiscal year because it was, I guess, immediately following that fiscal year. So that's the only variance there that we had to kind of work through. So
we would expect that would be lower than budget next year?
yes.
Unless you have to pay them all retirement. I can't afford that.
As part of the financial report, I provided the detail report. It's about 50 pages that shows each fund, each department, each revenue and expenditure line. This is including all of the activity for the full fiscal year. It also includes balance sheet information with assets and liabilities. I wasn't planning to go through those 50 pages in detail.
If you were.
Oh, no, he wasn't.
Think.
Did you highlight the ones you want to know about?
Oh, I want to go up and know about every line.
So yes, I would like to know how you would like to proceed. What questions you have, or what departments, what funds you're interested in looking at the numbers.
I don't have any questions.
Then I didn't see, I was looking for this on your notes, and I didn't see it in your notes. So this is the first time I've seen it, is tonight.
Okay. So yeah, the detailed report was posted on the website along with the agenda.
And when you said you were gonna have a report in your email, I looked at your notes, and I thought, where's the report?
Evan can be sneaky at times, so.
Where's the report? So I'm let me just ask you some questions here then. On your general fund, you've got SID number 4 and SID number 2 receivables. What are those?
What page are you on?
I don't know what page.
It says up at the top, isn't it?
Yeah, it's page.
And Councilman, can you bring your mic out from behind your computer so people online can hear? We have a viral audience
Page 3.
online.
These are current assets, which would be, should be our cash, right? But we don't have, we've got an SID number 4 and an SID number 2 receivable.
Those are related to some sidewalk improvement projects where property owners adjacent to the sidewalk were billed for a certain portion of the cost of those projects. And so those dollar amounts are the remaining amounts that are still owed to the city.
And how do we collect those?
That's the question. I think that's why it's still showing as being owed, because we haven't been able to collect on those.
Some years ago, they had a improvement district in front of my house. And your option was to pay cash or have it added to your utility bill. So I would suggest that that's what we do, add it to the utility bill if they're not going to pay it in cash.
Did you pay yours?
I paid it in cash.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's what we do going forward. I would suggest that would be the proper way to do it, and I signed a paper. We had a paper we could sign. I'm going to pay cash for it, and I'll pay it by this date. Or you can add it to my utility bill at X amount of X dollars a month. And those that wanted to pay had it to their utility bill. It was no interest, but they paid it so much a month. And so I think that's the way we ought to do it.
Okay.
We won't have those outstanding like that.
We'll look into that one. That's a great suggestion, Councilman, and
Okay.
we'll have Evan and John take a look at that.
And what does prepaid expenses contain?
I'd have to pull a detail to see what makes up that number. I don't know right off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But I can let you know.
Okay, and maybe some of these you'll have to let me know on. There's some things I'm not, I'm not familiar with the terms on it, and I'm sure you probably have some explanation for it. But on our liabilities, we have construction retention payable.
So when the city does major capital improvement projects, in a lot of those contracts, we have a provision that we don't pay them all the money that they have earned until a certain period of time has passed to ensure that they complete the project and that it's
so we keep that.
done
That's
properly.
the money we've got, and when the project's completed, then we pay them.
We do.
Is that correct? And then we have some development payment in lieu of escrow. that would mean, escrow would mean we'd have them put some money with us, same type of thing. But similar
Yeah,
type of thing, right?
yeah, similar. In this case, developers can put money into escrow through a bank, but if I think it's usually on smaller projects when they'll give us the money instead of going through a bank,
Then you hold it there.
and we hold it
So
until,
it's a payable to them when they finish the job then,
right.
same type of thing, okay. Maybe we ought to have Phil talk to us about what the fire district impact fee is gonna do now.
I'll let you know after my first meeting in January.
Okay, all right. Now, we have sales tax payable, what is that for things we're purchasing, trucks, stuff like that, what is that for?
It's actually a sales tax liability for things that we sell or for admissions that we sell. We have to pay sales tax on all of the pool admissions, for example,
When do we pay those, Evan?
quarterly.
So this is for the end of the year, we pay that during the first quarter, or what do we do?
Yeah, so this would be the amount of money that was owed for the last quarter of the fiscal year. So it would have been paid in July.
Okay, so we didn't have that, we weren't billed for it until then. Is that the same thing with all these other, like wages payable, withholding tax payable, flex benefits payable? Is that because we had payroll that was due, but it wasn't paid till after the
Right,
fact?
right.
So we list it as a payable, so it shows in this
Yeah,
current budget, but we don't want to actually pay it till next year.
it's a payable at June 30th.
Yeah.
And then once it's actually paid, then the payable is erased.
Evan, what is the Queen pageant?
So the Queen pageant is a city-sponsored event, but we use this line to keep a running balance for them.
Okay, that's
So
what I thought.
their revenues exceed expenditures, and so we kind of use that as a holding spot for the money that they've earned for their pageant.
And we have deferred revenue. That's a pretty good size amount. What's deferred revenue consist of?
It's related to property taxes, and it really just has to do with the timing of
Collecting
when
property
property taxes are billed and collected, and when that revenue is supposed to be recognized. And so at the end of the fiscal year, we report that deferred revenue that's being delayed, I guess. It's not being collected until the next fiscal year. So because the property tax bills aren't really due until November.
Until November, but we have to have our tax stuff done so that it goes out by the 1st of July or something, don't we?
Well, I think what we're doing is recognizing a portion of the property tax revenue, because the property taxes that are due in November, part of that money pertains to January through June, but the revenue has been deferred because it's not been collected yet
Once it's collected
until
and
the
erased,
next
is that-
fiscal year. So it's really just a timing issue with our fiscal year compared to their tax year.
Okay, the next thing was off-site improvements deposits.
With each building permit, there's a $500 off-site bond that is charged, and it's a similar deal where we hold their $500 until they comply with all of the regulations or requirements of their permit, and then we give that money back once they've completed all the requirements.
So have we never had to give any money back or what?
Because there's $45,000.
Yeah.
I would say, I mean, we do give those back regularly, so I would say it's probably due to the building activity that we're seeing.
If you have off-site improvement deposits, that does not, that 45,450 would not be $500 for each building permit.
It could be, because this year we've had 150 building permits issued. So, granted, some of them have been completed by this point, but about 100 would be $50,000. So there's quite a few out there right now, and there's a couple of commercial buildings which are probably higher than the 500. So I think that's why.
And
that
there
would
are
make
some
sense.
who haven't fully complied with the requirements, so we're still hanging on to their $500.
Okay. Business licenses were down on, it's on page 6. Business licenses were down. And I see the landlord's one is down all the way. That's because we're not collecting those anymore?
The state law related to business licenses changed,
Yeah.
I think, partway through the fiscal year.
Mm-hmm.
So that reduced the revenues in business licenses.
Help me understand now, you got 3 columns here. Is one, my computer's not letting me, or my tablet's not letting me see what the years are on those. Are those 2017, the first column, and 2000?
No.
They're year-to-date actual and then the year-to-date budget, right?
Right. So it's all pertaining to fiscal year 17. Period actual, year-to-date actual, budget,
Okay.
and
That's
unearned.
Our state road allotment came in better than we thought, right?
Yes, it did.
And our state liquor allotment too, huh? Gee.
Building permit revenue and plan check fees and everything were significantly higher too, with the amount of building happening.
Mm-hmm. Our subdivision engineering fees came in considerably higher, and that's, I guess, because we're doing more building than we thought we would.
Yes, and in this and previous budgets, we had just traditionally not estimated high enough revenue, honestly. It was kind of just always pegged at that 10,000. This year, I can't remember what we budgeted. We budgeted a more realistic amount to begin with, because it's always exceeded that 10,000 that was budgeted.
And what caused park rental fees to be significantly higher? Or
Yeah, much higher. About almost 5 times what was budgeted. So
I'm just wondering if that's an accurate figure, because we are 6,500 in rental for parks, up to 25,000.
I would have to look at the detail behind that. In some of these revenue lines, we do budget very conservatively, just to leave some cushion there for, possible downturns. But we can look at the detail behind that. And
Well, I guess the other question would be on that is if I think that's I don't know if that's if you look at that, you've got that as in parentheses in the last column, as if it were a loss. You know what I'm saying?
well, that means it's $18,000 more than what was budgeted.
Okay. So on cherry days, we budgeted 35,000, spent 28,800, but that's not showing in parentheses
Right. So
because we spent less, right?
we're talking revenues.
Right. So let me ask you this question on that cherry days figure. Is that zeroed out, or is that carried over into next year?
So this is showing $28,000 in revenue, where we had budgeted $35,000 in revenue.
Right.
So you're asking if the $28,000 is carried over?
So you got 28,000. We budgeted 35,000. Okay.
So we got less than budget. We can look at the Cherry Days expense. That shows up on a different page.
Let's look at that when we get to it. And we did significantly better in the Queen pageant than you, right?
Yes.
The court was significantly lower.
Yes, it was $33,000.
33, almost 34,000. So we must be having a lot safer city now, huh?
We're happy that people are following the speed limit more, I guess, so that's good news.
Yeah, that is. That's real good news. And our interest earned is significantly better. What did you do there?
We budgeted low and the interest rates went up slightly.
Very slightly. Okay, good for you. I'm glad to see that. Okay. What would be miscellaneous revenue lumped into that? That's almost double what we budgeted for.
I'm not sure what makes up the bulk of that. A lot of the miscellaneous revenues are small things like copies and, minor revenues that don't fit the other categories, but...
Yeah, but would we have 30,000 in copies?
No.
I don't think so either.
No, we wouldn't.
It'd be nice to know what the
actually,
is.
One thing that is in that category is police reports. And it is true that we've had a lot more requests for police reports, including copies of body cam footage.
Oh, really?
So we do charge for that, and I don't know that it's $30,000, but it's significant, I would say.
Okay. All right. Well, we actually came in revenue-wise a little less than we budgeted for the year for total fund revenue, right?
Right. 94% of budget.
It came in about 300 or 400,
Correct.
which means we need to do some better planning when we get it in the budget going forward, right?
That's fair.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're down to expenditures, right?
Hey, wait. Before we go on,
Sure.
it shows that our revenues were $420,000 shorter than
what we budgeted.
Right.
Right.
But when you look at line 1038,900, which is just above that, we budgeted $485,000 of fund balance, which is budgeted as a revenue, but in reality, when you budget fund balance, there's no money that comes in, so we wouldn't expect to see a year-to-date actual in that dollar amount. So, for whatever that's worth.
Are you saying if you took away that 485, our other revenues were actually slightly higher
Yes.
than the budget, other than that use of fund balance?
Right, if you take that out of the equation.
So where did the 485,000? Where do we budget that from? General fund?
Yes,
All
that's
sorts of funds.
that's
All the
general
other funds.
fund balance in the general fund.
So we did not. You're saying that we did not transfer anything out of the general fund into this fund balance this time. That's what it's showing, right?
Well, we budgeted $485,000 of the general fund balance to be used, but
we didn't use it.
we didn't. Well, I guess the difference of those two would be the amount that we used. So 65,000.
Okay. We need to congratulate the finance department. They came in and under budget significantly in their salaries, and that must be because we weren't paying Evan enough, right?
That was the next thing I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, I thought you would.
No, actually, one of our employees has a modified work schedule right now because she's trying to finish her degree, and so she's on a reduced hours for a temporary basis.
And actually, as we go through it, every single general fund department was under budget, some significantly, especially parks was down in the 80s in 2 categories of parks. The only exception was the inspections department because the sheer number of homes that have been built exceeded our budget slightly, but everything else is under budget. Some are close, 99%, but they are under budget. And then some are significantly under
That
budget.
must mean that you're not showing those figures to the mayor, or he'd want to spend it somewhere.
I'm showing him after the fiscal year's over.
Yeah, so he doesn't know he had extra money to spend. All right, that's good. Except for, our inspections, they're way over, aren't they?
104%. So for the amount of construction activity, I think we did well.
Yeah.
But again,
And it's certainly been covered by the higher fees that have been charged, so.
Yeah, so the inspection department was $16,000 in the hole, but the actual building permit fees came in $70,000 over what we had budgeted. So the department was over, but the revenue to the department was actually significantly higher than the
Which
over
would
budget.
then mean that we need to kind of watch that.
Yeah.
And we got some part-time employees, and if we're, instead of going the hole, if those fees are not continuing to cover it, then we need to say, hey, we don't need those part-time employees anymore then.
Yep.
Okay.
Administration was 34,000 under budget. Non-departmental, 31,000. Police, 60,000. Streets, 37,000. Parks administration, 52,000. Parks, 63,000. Recreation, 44,000. All under budget numbers.
I'm glad we got John working there for us to keep you in line.
Everything's turned around since he came on board, so good job, John. Councilman Turner?
Well, on the Parks and Rec, the amphitheater theater program we planned on and we budgeted for, but then we didn't do it because of the remodels, right? So that probably reflects on why they're so low on their expenditures too. So
Yes, that's part of it.
So this next year, since we'll have a program there, that'll change significantly, I guess, correct?
Yes, that was definitely part of the savings. Amphitheater programs didn't happen. That was 21,000 of the savings of the 51 in Parks and Rec administration. Then part-time employees were less. Our parks crew, they did a great job. They didn't hire as many part-time people as they wanted. Part of it was not being able to find the people, to be perfectly honest. So they made do and did a great job keeping our parks in good shape. So wages was a significant saving across parks and recreation. Between the 3 parks and recreation budgets, the wage savings were almost 50,000. So, that was a big part of it too, just keeping those employee costs down.
Good. Let me ask you on revenue from the aquatic center. Group reservations were way down over what we budgeted.
Now
That's not because the Bowery rental is different than the
Yeah.
group reservations. What does group reservations
well,
entail?
I think we actually made a mistake and ended up reporting some of those group reservations under admission fees.
Well, yeah, they're up $50,000, and and group reservations is down almost $50,000.
Right. So I'd have to look at it, but I'm pretty sure that was the reason that those are off.
And I've got this sheet here that I'll be emailing you, Council. You don't have it yet, but group reservations over the entire Aquatic Center year, which does cover 2 fiscal years. Remember, part of the first couple months are in one fiscal year, the rest of the season's in another. Group reservations, looking at the whole season together, were 28,143. And last year's was 32,000, so it was a decline, just not quite as dramatic as it looks in this sheet.
Yeah, just that's a concerning figure that it would drop that far. What is the group reservation? Somebody reserves the whole pool, or
right?
And so but that's not tied to the Boweries then.
Not necessarily.
So the Bowery rental is a separate one, and that actually went up this season slightly from $24.15 to $26.75.
Salaries were considerably less. Is that did we hire some new people at a lower wage in there? Or?
Well, we eliminated some. In several departments, full-time positions and transition to part-time positions in a number of areas, so that is part of it. And then also, sometimes we just didn't replace employees or replace them with fewer and still made things work. So wages in general have declined across the city.
I'm not sure that I see a decline in the wages as much as I do just over what the budget was. You know, if you look up at wages, wages and benefits part of things.
Over the budgeted amount.
Actually increased. Yep. They were over what we budgeted for. You know, other things might have come in better than what we expected, but the wages and that came in a little higher than what we expected.
At the Aquatic Center.
Yeah. We didn't spend, for example, travel and training, we spent less. So where we spent some less, that's where we made up the difference, but not in wages and salaries.
Evan, do you feel bad? They're walking out on you?
Yeah, these guys are all walking out.
That's too exciting.
Usually they walk out before I start, so.
Thanks, Jay.
So you feel good, huh?
As long as we know the budget's fiscal confident, we're great.
It's under budget, so that's good news.
Mayor, what do we, where are we on that fee? How much of our sales tax or our increase in our tax that we voted for is going to Provo for the UTA for the
That's a good question. I'm trying to get to the bottom of on the UTA board that as we speak. I'll give you an update on that in a future meeting once I've got a few more details from the UTA.
Cheryl, don't you have some questions?
I'm looking. I'm going with you.
Also, Evan, I thought the 485 back from earlier was part of this transfer to the capital improvement fund of 500,000. Because didn't we transfer some money from the general fund to the capital improvement fund so it would show up earlier as a transfer? And then here it's showing, so we didn't necessarily spend it to balance our general fund budget. We transferred it to the capital improvement fund, right?
I'm glad you mentioned that. I was a little confused, but yes, we did. We transferred 500,000 to the capital improvement fund in one place, and then in addition to that, we transferred $727,000 of Class C money to the Capital Improvement Fund.
Yeah, and that 485 from earlier was part of that. So the 485 wasn't to balance our general fund because our general fund was already in balance.
Right.
It didn't need fund balance. The fund balance was going towards capital projects.
Right, yes.
Impact fees are looking okay, aren't they?
Yeah, transportation impact fee was higher than expected.
Capital improvements, accounts receivable on capital improvements is about $500,000. Is that receivable from another fund, the general fund, or what is that from?
It's related to our grants that we have through the county. So it's money that we spent and submit reimbursement to the county. And so at June 30th, we hadn't received the money from the county yet, but it had been spent. And this is related to the properties that we've been purchasing on Washington Boulevard, as well as Monroe.
Have we gotten that money back from them yet? Or
We've gotten a large portion of it. I think there's still a small amount that's outstanding.
Maybe we should tie it to the county's utility bill or something. Make sure we
Great idea.
to Kerry Gibson's utility bill. Okay. Did you give Cheryl $14,000 for the Pleasant View Trail? She's our trail person. Cheryl, they shortchanged you. They budgeted $20,980 and they only gave you $14,000.
Just because we like to deliver projects under budget, Councilman, so it came in under budget.
On the municipality grant projects, that means we got more, a little more than, we spent more on municipality grant projects, 3,000 more.
Mm-hmm.
So,
That was because we took next fiscal year's money to do the volleyball court, if you remember, at the same time. So this fiscal year we're now in, we won't expend that money because we basically kind of advanced that grant money to do the volleyball courts with it.
how close are we going to come in on this when we receive, I know the animal shelter, that's budgeted in 2 years. How close will we come to that on, I mean, we only spent $6,700 this year, but.
We're looking at coming in under budget on it. I hate to say a number just yet, but I think it will be significant, maybe 10 to 20,000. John, what's your feelings on it?
Yeah, I think it'll be in that range. It'll be about 80% of the budget that we've spent, so we're saving about 20.
And that's a third of what we would have spent contracting it out in any case. So not only do we save all that, but then what we budgeted, we won't use it all. We don't project to.
Evan, you made, I think in one of your notes, you had something about the phone system and for City Hall and the police, that we were over budget on the expenditures on that by about
$4,000.
$4,000.
Yeah.
What was your note on that?
Let me look at it here.
Did we get more push button 1, push button 2, push button 3 than live voices, so it's costing us more?
No, there was a major piece outside of the building that they had to add in order to make it work. And I don't know exactly what the equipment was, but it was basically an unexpected equipment cost, plus our own IT, our contracted IT person ended up spending a lot of hours helping get the thing set up, get the system set up, And so that part wasn't anticipated in the budget either. So that was a couple of thousand.
The Public Works building, we budgeted 12,000, but did we really only spend, will we expend that whole 12,000, Mayor? Some of it in this year and some what?
Yes.
Or,
I know some of it crossed over, Evan or John.
I'm pretty sure we spent the whole thing
Okay.
between the
so,
two
too.
fiscal years.
we spent all, huh? So rental deposits and prepaid rent. We're getting rent from some of those houses now, and is that what the rental deposits add up to?
Yes.
Good. We're not paying a business license as a landlord, are we?
Paying
No.
a business license?
The city doesn't have to pay that, do we?
We do have a license,
We
but we didn't pay one because we would just pay it to our staff, so it just would circle in the same fund. So but we do have a license.
So we've got, we're coming pretty close to the rental, what we budgeted for rental. Do you see that going up or staying about the same, Mayor?
John is handling the rentals. What do you think where that is, John?
We actually anticipate from this point on our revenue will be good. Might be triple this because we've had a lot of expenses just making sure that the buildings aren't going to fall apart.
Yeah.
We've probably replaced 2 water heaters. We just sent a plumber in and into all of them and said make sure there's nothing that's going to go wrong because we wanted the people living there to be safe, and so we've fixed a lot of things we won't have to fix this year.
So we still have a property manager doing the things for us?
Yes.
Okay.
And also, we had to expend some money from the capital improvement fund to get them into shape, but that will be paid back.
Now I'm assuming in the water fund, which is page 32, we're talking about accounts receivable. Is that delinquent water fees? Because that's a pretty good sum. 107,000.
I think that's just the utility bills that are owed
At
June 30th.
June 30th, which were billed by June 28th or something like that.
Yeah, whenever the billing cycle is.
And
So each of the utility funds should have something like
Deferred
that.
outlaws pension, is that, what is that? Is that somebody that we're paying their pension for them, or that's not a 401k or something?
No. The accounting rules for reporting pension liabilities have changed in the last few years. So we're required to report on our books North Ogden City's liability that's related to Utah State Retirement System. So they give us numbers and then we have to input it into our books so that it's not just a URS liability, it's actually a liability that's shared by all of URS member entities.
Right.
I'm just glad I don't have to calculate that number.
Now, this is a small amount, but it's interesting to me. Fire hydrant rentals is one of our liabilities. We rent some fire hydrants instead of paying for them and putting them in?
It's actually water meters that we rent for contractors to have water on a temporary basis while they're constructing.
So it's a fire hydrant meter rental. So they give us a deposit for the meter that we let them use, and then if they destroy it, then we get to keep the $600.
Okay. And this Cove Reservoir payable, we owe more than $1 million on that?
When the Cove neighborhood was built, the city didn't have a reservoir up there to service it, and so we were not interested in building a reservoir for that developer's convenience. So the developer built the reservoir at his expense, basically loaned the money to the city, and then we're paying it back with impact fees in that neighborhood. As new homes are built in the Cove, I think all of or most of the water impact fee goes to pay that developer back because he basically built the reservoir ahead of time for us.
Is that the same thing with the Northview Reservoir payable?
Same concept.
And where is that?
That's a great question.
That's the other one that's over
By Pleasant View?
Yeah, it's over by Frog Rock, the smaller tank that's over there.
That one that same developer, Marriott, did?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And the Cove one's at the top of like 800.
In the water fund, we didn't plan on selling any assets, but we sold almost 100,000 in assets.
That was the cell tower easement that we
Oh,
sold.
that's good.
We were originally planning for that money to go in the general fund, but because it sits on a water fund asset, we put it into the water fund.
And then we didn't plan anything for builder's system contributions, but we got almost 200,000 there. That's good too. What was that planning?
So that's when developers put in water lines, water infrastructure, and so they're not actually giving us money, but they're giving us assets.
They're giving us the asset. Okay, good. Well, I see you got Mr. Satterthwaite's thing in depreciation. That actually, we put more in depreciation than we budgeted
I
for,
saw that.
didn't we?
That's actually the depreciation expense.
Yeah.
So we're reporting about $700,000 in depreciation expense. That doesn't mean that we set aside
Doesn't mean we
$700,000.
set that aside?
No.
What does it mean then?
Well, we have to recognize that expense for the assets that have been previously purchased. So it's really a reporting requirement.
So that's the depreciation on everything, but we haven't funded it. It's like unfunded depreciation?
I believe it's partially funded. Would have to run a calculation to figure that out for sure. Let me see.
But in essence, yes.
Yeah, I would think.
You know, it might be partially funded, but it's, and it's only for,
Water stuff.
yeah, it's not even all the depreciation stuff.
So our year-to-date revenue over expenditures in the water fund shows $533,000. So I guess I probably need to step back on what I said, because technically we have that 533,000 plus 698,000 that's going to fund balance. So I guess if we look at it that way, then we actually have set aside that money. I mean, it's gone into fund balance.
Well, that's what I would have assumed it was, is fund balance and how much is in there, If not, then Lynn's gonna have to be elected for another year. Can't go on his mission till he gets that straightened out.
And every year, too, just a general comment, might not balance because some years we may do a larger project, so the expenditures could be higher for capital, but over the trend line, we are saving more.
So I guess I need to clarify under revenues where it says retained earnings. Can you see that? That shows 1.15 million in retained earnings. That's basically fund balance that we are budgeting to spend, which and then at the bottom line we ended up with 533,000 in revenue over expenditures. So yeah, no. So I think that's correct. That we are funding our depreciation in the water fund.
Okay. So in the sewer fund, gosh, our salaries went up by $7,000, but our employee benefits went up by almost $21,000.
Is that because we're splitting between the sewer and the?
I don't know. I'm just, you know, that's a big jump in benefits compared to what salaries went up.
I think what happened here is we reallocated some salaries and plugged somebody into the sewer fund that had a higher insurance cost, you know, for being on a family plan versus a single plan or declining insurance. Mm-hmm. So I think we had budgeted for an employee who had a lesser insurance cost, and then we moved a different employee into the sewer fund that had a higher insurance cost.
Central Weaver Sewer District, we came in under budget, about $4,000, and we must be expecting that to go up because we raised that for this coming year, right?
And part of that is that the increase, correct me if I'm wrong, Evan, was only for half of this fiscal year, right? Because it started January of this calendar year. Is that correct?
Yeah, I wouldn't use that explanation for the $4,000. That $4,800 is only 0.4%. So we probably just rounded the budget up. And so we were, you know, being within 0.4% of the budget is pretty close. But those rates go up every year, and they're going up at an even higher percent next year.
Received a notice that it'll be going up again in January.
You know, I heard an argument last time we were here about something about when you say that's 0.4%, that's only $4,000. When we were talking about the amphitheater last time, and somebody said, well, if you compare this to Salt Lake, it'd be this kind of percentage, okay? Well, I'm going to tell you what, that 0.4% that equates to $4,000, I bet you every one of you, day in and day out, will go to your financial institution and argue over 0.4% on the interest they pay you, or the 0.4% you may have to pay in interest on a loan. So that argument of it's only 0.4%, no, I understand that, but just because it's the people's money, we should be just as concerned about the 0.4% as we would be if it was our own money.
So it is in our favor.
Yes, I understand that, but I'm just saying I don't want to hear that argument ever again that, well, it's only 0.4%, because I guarantee you're going to go down to the credit union and say, well, how come I'm having to pay 2.9%? Well, last year I paid 2.5%, you know?
Okay.
So. Well, we're coming in over budget on utility billings, aren't we?
You're talking revenues?
Yeah. I'm looking on page 41 now. And all of utility billings seem to be coming in over budget. So
I would imagine that's due to new growth.
You know, that's interesting. We came in on the waste management contract. Is that still, that's not waste management we're using now, right?
No, we still have it labeled as waste management, but
But
it's
we came
It's
in
Republic.
we came in
now.
under budget on that, which is good. But we went over on transfer station fees, which is a fee is that passed on to us or by waste management, or is that the county?
That's from the county.
The county gives it to us.
And those are, the county transfer station has been struggling and fees have been increased there.
but we were actually under budget on that.
What?
Transfer station fees.
Yeah, we were under budget, but I just wondered if that was passed on to us by waste management
I
or
see.
by the county. I think Lynn should be here to see how well we're funding depreciation. Every one of those depreciation accounts is up over what it was. Compensated absences on page 43 for the motor pool fund. We were way over budget on that. That must be, is that comp time?
No, compensated absences. At the end of the year, we have to look at how much leave the employees have in the bank because it's a liability to the city. So we have to adjust that liability. And when we do that adjustment, there's an offsetting expenditure entry. So it shows up in expenditures even though it's not an actual cash expense.
Okay. And we thought we'd be at $200 and we're at $5,800. Utilities in the motor pool fund, what would that be for their utilities? Do they pay utilities to the city?
It's the utility expenses at the Public Works facility.
What would make that $11,000 more than we budgeted for? Do we leave water running over there, or what's going on there?
I don't know that we've fully got a handle on what the real cost is, because we used to budget for that in the streets department, I think. So we made a change in the way we budget for those utilities. Let me see what the streets fund or the streets department shows.
Compliment them on fuel purchases. They're way under budget. Is that because prices are down, Mayor, or are we just very conscious about that? And vehicle maintenance is way down, 17,000 under budget, which is good.
I think that's great mechanics. Tyrell and Cooper, and they really do a good job. And as far as the fuel, I'm sure the fuel prices is also positively affected that, but
Equipment leases were about $8,000 more than we budgeted for. Is that the trucks and equipment that we lease through them, or is that small equipment that we lease from time to time? Do you have any idea what that is?
I believe that would be small equipment leased for short-term projects, but I'm not 100% sure. Evan, do you know?
We actually have some larger equipment that we lease, and it's more of a rental. We pay a monthly fee for a backhoe, maybe a skid steer. I think it's two pieces of larger equipment.
Who we lease those from, do you know, Evan?
John Deere is one of them.
They're actual leases. They're not. I mean, we don't rent it for so many hours. We entered into a contract to rent the.
It's a monthly rental.
Do you know if that's negotiated annually, or is that just an ongoing thing?
I'm not sure. Dave takes care of that, so I don't know.
The last, like the backhoe agreement, I think 2 years ago it came to the council to do that because they were guaranteeing they'd buy it back from us for a certain amount. And so we looked at buying it or leasing it and then selling it back to them, and it was incentives have gone away from the manufacturer now. So the next round we're going to be paying a little more because they just took away the sweetheart deals from us. So
I feel bad Lynn's not here to see all this depreciation that's being funded.
Maybe he's watching online.
If I were he, I wouldn't be.
I should have excused Councilman Satterthwaite at the start of the meeting. He will not be here this evening and asked to be excused.
Well, I compliment you, Mayor, that you're over budget on the revenue for the RDA.
The RDA and CDA are going to turn out for us in the long run.
Okay. Okay, Evan, I think you've done a good job on your financial report. Thanks, and you had some answers to questions for us.
Very good. Any other questions?
I was just disappointed that Phil asked so many questions. I wonder if he asks that many questions of the Weber County School Board when he's on their board.
Sometimes,
It's all about the kids.
yes.
Well, I know a board president there that didn't know it was all about the kids.
Evan, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for your time and effort, and you're doing a good job for us. Appreciate it.
Okay, any other discussion on fiscal end of year report?
Cheryl probably has some more discussion on it.
Good discussion.
Okay, we'll go on then to item 3, which is an ordinance related to disposal of property. A few things we felt we needed to get updated in our city code, and John will be the presenter on this.
okay, council. This is something we had mentioned to you in the past that it would be coming back, but I didn't give you any details. So this is something that isn't necessarily that you have to pass it tonight. In the staff report, there's this ordinance deals with 2 things. The first one is a simple thing, at least in my impression. It's just the acceptance of property by for ownership by the city happens 2 ways. One is the council accepts it, or the planning commission accepts it. So when we approve a plat, it just comes into the city ownership when it's recorded. So that item on this ordinance is kind of a cleanup item. The second item, which is actually the first one in the ordinance, and I've got it here in red, deals with the disposal of real property. Under the state code, we're required to identify what constitutes a significant piece of real property. And so this ordinance would define that. The first section in green is option number 1 that says all property that's owned by the city, real property, is a significant piece of real property except for easements, like utility easements. And then the second option says anything larger than a half acre is a significant piece of real property. And the reason why the second option might be more agreeable to the city council is it eliminates some of the hearing and noticing requirements if we call those not significant pieces of property. My impression would be that the council would still be fully aware and participate in that discussion, but we wouldn't have to do the full hearing and process. So a good example is that piece of property behind the senior center that we have told the folks over there that we were going to sell to them. We wouldn't have had to do the hearings and the formal stuff. We still could have had the discussion, but there wouldn't have been the 14-day notice and all that kind of stuff that happened. And really, it's just a council decision. Do you want to leave it as we've been doing it, which is any piece of real property needs to be disposed of by the council, or do you want to pick some other sort of size that makes a difference? Yeah, Councilman Turner.
So what, just out of curiosity, what determined the half acre?
Just a number I picked out of my.
Okay, all right.
hat.
That's not something that's the state demands, okay?
No, and really, so in today's market, for example, residential property, the most recent appraisal we've seen done, it went for 90 grand an acre. So it's 45 grand. So it's not a small expense. And so the council could also say something like, instead of it being a measurement on the acres, we could do a price, because we would still do an appraisal, and that sort of thing. So we could say anything worth more than $20,000, or that kind of stuff, if the council wants to go down that route as well.
So this is for sale of property, not,
Excess property.
yeah, of excess
Right.
property.
Yeah.
So if I understand it, then what we're doing currently is any piece of property, no matter the value, no matter how large, right?
Right.
It'd be option 1 in green.
Yeah, that would be in green. With the clarification that we've added that easements aren't counted in that. And just so you know, the way we handle easements is we get typically that happens when someone's combining two lots together or they're moving a property line. A lot of times there's a utility easement all the way around the property. So we reach out to Questar and Comcast and everyone who might have lines in the ground and say, do you have a utility there? And if not, do you plan on putting utility there? And then the third question is, if the answer is no to both of those, are you okay with us getting rid of this? And we get approval from all the utility companies before we before we allow the easements to be modified, because we want to make sure we're good partners with those utility companies.
I personally favor number 1, but it's what we've been.
And we're fine with either. We really don't have a preference. It's totally up to you.
I kind of feel the same way.
Okay.
I mean, it's just,
Yeah. Well, and you've noticed those hearings haven't been that cumbersome, easy to go through. And so if that's the case, what we've done is I did prepare an ordinance stating that. And so this is the clean version of that ordinance that says right here, so this is that first section that was in green. All real estate owned by the city constitutes a significant piece of real property, except for easements. So we could pass that if we wanted to. And if you did want to, it would be ordinance 2017-25.
I just don't see any reason to, 2017-25?
Yes.
I don't see any reason to bring it back. Do you? I make a motion, we pass that ordinance in 2017-25.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve this ordinance, and I assume this is with option 1. Is that correct, Councilman Uri? Okay, and second concurs. So motion and second to approve this ordinance with option 1 selected, that all parcels of property with the exception of utility easements will be brought to the council for formal disposition. Is there any further discussion? We'll start the voting with Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Uri,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
and Councilman Turner.
yes.
Okay, thank you. That motion passes on a vote of 4-0. And we'll move on to item 4, public hearing on a proposed annexation located at 744 East, 1700 North. We'll have John fill in. Our city recorder had to step away, so this is a pretty routine matter, council. An annexation that's coming into the city, just under an acre of size.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to see. But for those of you who don't know where this is, 1700 North is down here.
Mm-hmm.
And then this street is 775 East that runs up. There's a couple newer homes here. The Mackley's house is up here with their horse property next to them. But this is just these individuals want to rebuild their house.
They tore the other one down.
They tore it down. And so this is the final step in the process to approve the annexation, and they'll be in the city once the lieutenant governor gives approval to the plat and the redrawing of the boundaries for the city.
That is under an acre? I would have thought it was over an acre, but.
Let's see. It is 38,533 square feet. So it's 0.885 acres.
Okay.
So it's long, but it's also skinny. And we just need to have a public hearing to receive any comments, and then the council can take action on it as it sees fit.
Are there any questions before the public hearing? Okay, then the public hearing is now open. If anyone would like to comment on this proposed annexation at 744 East, 1700 North, we invite you forward at this time.
Don't you fight over it. Don't fight over coming forward here now.
Seeing none,
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
we have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you then. The public hearing is now closed, and council, we're on to item 5 for your consideration and action of this proposed annexation.
Motion to approve the annexation, which would be ordinance 2017-26.
Yes.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve this annexation. Is there any further discussion? We'll start the vote with Councilman Uri,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Turner,
Yes.
and Councilwoman Stoker.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Then that motion passes on 4-0, and we'll move forward with the annexation.
John, question, can they start building on that before the lieutenant governor gives a stamp of approval, or now that we've approved it, or what?
So they, we entered into an agreement with the county to give us the land use authority over it. And so they could have started building.
Right,
yeah,
already?
Yeah.
Okay,
And so, yeah.
okay.
Okay, we'll move to item 5 and 6, which is related to our proposed CDBG grant applications.
Need 6 and 7.
6 and 7, yes, thank you. Our federal grant applications. And have got some ideas, but federal law requires that we hold a hearing to get input from any citizens who wish to make comments on the proposed CDB application. So we'll ask John to give us a brief overview on this, then we'll hold a public hearing, and then it will come back to you, council, again for consideration and action.
Okay, council. For these public hearings, there's some specific language we have to read as part of the public hearing. That's what I've got here. But these grants are aimed at low to moderate income neighborhoods. And that's based on, if you remember from our moderate income discussion a couple months ago or a month ago, it's basically about, I think it was 62,000, a family that makes 63,000 or less a year. And the way we do that, we've already done the study in the neighborhood where we want to do this project, and it should qualify if we can get the grant this year. Last year we didn't get the grant for it, so we moved our water line project to a different area where there was a little bit more of a need. But the reason this hearing is here is to make sure the residents have all the information about the community block grant program, as well as discussion of some of the applications. This year, the Wasatch Regional Front Council is expecting to receive approximately $572,000, but they could receive more in this new year. All eligible activities that can be accomplished under this program are identified in the CDBG application policies and procedures manuals, and interested persons can review it at any time. Gary Kerr with our building department has a copy of that manual. Some eligible activities listed include public works projects such as water lines, sewer lines, fire stations, acquisition of real property, provision of public services such as food banks or homeless shelters. In the past, these are some of the CD projects that have happened. Loans for home improvements for North Ogden City residents, building the senior center, water line project in the Green Acres areas, sidewalk and curb and gutter projects in Green Acres, and constructions of ADA accessible restroom for the Oak Lawn project. For projects in the future for the city's CDBG project list, we have the Coldwater Waterline project to replace the old cast iron water line with a new ductile or PVC line. Coldwater is the neighborhood by Oak Lawn Park. And then there's also trail crossing, which is improving pedestrian safety at road crossings throughout the city where the trails, the canal trail and other things like that are. If anyone has any questions, comments, or suggestions during the hearing, we just need them to identify themselves by name before speaking, and we will include their names in the minutes, and we will specifically respond to their questions and suggestions during the hearing. And that's what I have to read to you.
Okay. So any questions, council, on the purpose of the public hearing before we hold the public hearing about the CDBG grant program? And if we do ultimately submit an application, we'll hold another hearing in the near future to let people know what we're applying for. With that, the public hearing is now open. If you'd like to make any comments on the city possibly applying for a community development block grant program, which comes from the federal government and is administered by the Wasatch Front Regional Council here in Utah, we'd love to hear your comments at this time. Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Then the public hearing is now closed. And council members, do you have any comments you'd like to give on these possible projects we've identified, or any other ideas you have? And then we'll take it back and work on coming up with a likely one item to actually apply for, and then bring that back for another hearing and for your approval. Councilman Turner.
Is this a grant? Is this a matching grant? Is it a, how does that work?
There is a match required in this. It's not a set amount. That kind of varies on the project and is part of the program.
So, is there a reason not to consider the project that didn't get funded last year? I mean, if it was important last year and we didn't get it, I would think that would be important to do it this year. You know?
That is definitely one to consider as well. It didn't score well last year, so.
So you don't think the chance will be good at getting it?
It's hard to say, you know, but we thought that these that have been put here would potentially score higher, but we can definitely look at that one too. It's not out of the consideration.
And they also changed the way they did the score last year. And so there were certain things that the city, like a formally adopted safety program or things like that, that we didn't do. And so we didn't get the kind of baseline points that some of the other communities got. The other thing too is it's, you know, 572,000 doesn't go a long ways. And so I think we had gotten one for the Oak Lawn Park restrooms the year before.
Just a couple years ago.
And so it might have just not been our turn to get one. So
we got a $220,000 grant in the very recent past. So certainly that is something the committee looks at as well, to try and spread the funds around to different communities.
Is there any action you need from us tonight?
We just need there would be a motion to consider a CDBG application, essentially to approve us to put the paperwork together.
And then bring it back to you.
Yeah, it's not approving any specific amount or anything like that. It's just to get the process started.
I move then that we approve consideration of a proposed CDBG application.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve consideration for participation in the CDBG program and exploring an application. Is there any further discussion? We'll start the voting with Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Turner,
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
and Councilman Uri.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Then that passes on a 4-0 vote as well. And we'll go to item 8, bringing back some answers to the questions you had when we talked about vehicles and trailers and towing, specifically related to winter parking. John will be the presenter to kind of bring us up to speed on what he has researched.
So the council had asked what the fees are for towing, and I'm just going to start there. This is a document produced by the state that establishes the maximum towing fees. A towing group can always charge less than this, but this is the maximum. So for them to show up and tow your vehicle, it's $147. If they show up and they don't tow your vehicle, if you can convince them, hey, don't take it, it's $73.50. A per day fee is $40, and they can do an administrative fee up to $31 with some fuel surcharges and things like that. Those are the ones that we would be dealing with because they're the non-consent police-generated fees. So the ones on the right side deal with if you park at Hug Hess and you're parked there illegally, so they have you towed. Those are the fees for the other side. So that doesn't relate to what we're talking about. One thing that was brought up was the idea that we could piggyback on the county contract, which there's already a list of approved towing agencies and they just cycle through them. One concern that was raised was some of those towing agencies are not necessarily close to the city, and if we call Weber Dispatch and someone in South Weber is the next person on the list, then they would be the people called, and our residents would have to travel 15 miles or so to go get their vehicle. That being said, there's not a towing group in North Ogden, or I don't even think there's one in Harrisville. So there
should be down on 2nd Street.
Yeah, so 2nd Street is probably the closest. There was a recommendation by the police chief that we at least include the towing groups on 21st Street because they're some of the larger operations and they have more drivers and they respond quicker. So, yeah.
Is this something that we would have to do an RFP, or we could just include whatever towing agencies we choose?
So we would do an RFP, and essentially the way that we'd probably structure it is any towing group that wants to apply that's within so many feet or so many miles, we'll put them on our list. And then with the understanding, there'll be a caveat in there that we'll take if someone shows poor performance. So we'll set some parameters like they need to show up within 15 or 20 minutes of being called or whatever the police feel is appropriate. And if they fail to meet those, then we'll take them off the list. And all we do is the list will just be at the county, and they'll just cycle through our list the same way they do through the county's list. So at dispatch,
we use the county dispatchers.
Yeah. They'll have our list in a different folder than the county list. And so the actual consolidated fee schedule, just so you can see it might be easier for me to search down. So this is the new language that basically says the owner of the vehicle, trailer, recreation vehicle, or other personal item removed from the public right-of-way shall pay the actual fee charged to the company hired to remove the item. And then it identified that's the fee set by state statute. And so the to be determined just basically means it's a fee that you can't specifically identify because it modifies based on how many days it's in the impound, what the fuel surcharge is, stuff like that. So, and one thing to remember, this is going to be a last resort. The officers will still continue to knock on the doors. Hey, you need to move your car. This is more of kind of for the people who are the bad. There are two situations. They just refuse to comply, or it's such an imminent safety hazard that it has to be moved right then. And even then, the officers will knock on the door and see if they can get the people to pull it out of the right of way before they call a tow company, because it's a lot easier for them to do it that way. Yeah, Councilman Turner.
So, a couple quick questions. How often do we know how often this happens? A year or month or anything? Or do you even have a guess on this? Because I can't imagine it being too frequent.
So we have not towed anyone, as far as anyone who wasn't associated with a moving traffic violation. We have not towed any vehicles that were illegally parked since I've been with the city, so for 5 years.
And that's correct. This will be new this year, that vehicles that are parked on the street will actually be towed. We've always said we may, but
yeah,
we never have.
It really comes up as part of snow because 2 vehicles were struck last year by the snowplows, and we just thought we should have a trigger or a way to get them off the street if we need to.
So that's, to me, I'd consider that kind of an imminent danger if they're hit by a plow or something like that. Have we considered or talked about possibly, like, the ones that aren't imminent, putting boots, because we could purchase the boots and put those on the vehicles, and then the people have to pay to get them off, and then that gives us a little more leverage to get them to move them in the future? Is that something we'd even discussed or thought about?
We haven't discussed or thought about it, because usually the idea would be that if it is imminent, needs to get out of the way, if we put a boot on it, and if it's the night or the weekend, they're not going to get it moved until we open the next day, and they talk to they can pay the fees at the court. But so we haven't looked at that, but you know.
So I didn't know if that was just another option we could look at. I'm not opposed to the towing. I just I've dealt with some of that in the past you tow somebody, it's terrible. I'll tell you right now, it sucks.
We hope it would only happen once or twice before. It would just be a friendly reminder to help people get those cars off the road.
So.
Yeah, and we even looked at possibly, just keeping them at our yard to keep things cheaper. But the liability associated with that is we wouldn't be saving anybody any time or effort, because it's, at least down at the yards, they have some concern over the cars because they don't want to be in lawsuits any more than we do.
So right now, I mean, we give them a warning usually before we ever tow them. So the tow would be on a second offense or something like that, right? Usually.
Usually.
Be on,
or something very serious, like right in a major roadway or something.
Sure.
But yes, it would be not the first tool in most cases.
And we'll still write fines and things like that. Most of the places I think you'll see these fees or the towing be a risk is the faster moving roads, Washington 2600, 3100, 1050, and maybe the more narrow ones, Fruitland Mountain Road, things like that. Because that's where the trucks are moving quicker and they can't maneuver around those vehicles with those wings and stuff the way that, yeah.
Or potentially vehicles that have been warned.
Yeah.
And haven't been moved. I mean, they've been given a couple of, doors been knocked, a warning's been put on the vehicle. We do have a few of those individuals out there.
And in the summer, we actually end up with a lot of recreational trailers that sit, and we haven't towed anyone yet. And I think I actually think we're more likely to use it in that situation than for winter, because most people are pretty good about getting their cars out of the road when they're warned.
Yeah.
Most, but so.
You get a resolution number?
It is 13-2017.
I'll move that we approve the amending the resolution. Now, is this a new resolution then, or just amending resolution 8-2017?
So the resolution 13-217 replaces and amends resolution 08-2017.
I move that we approve resolution 13-2017.
Motion and a second, approving the updated consolidated fee schedule. Is there any further discussion? We'll start the vote with Councilman Turner,
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Uri,
Yes.
and Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That passes then on a vote of 4-0. We're on to item 9, council members. This is just an item basically of housekeeping for the rest of this year, December. Our Mayor Pro Tem, Councilman Satterthwaite, and I are potentially both going to be gone at some points in December because I've got a military training, and then he's got some things he's taking care of, preparing to go on a LDS mission. So I wanted just to see, do you want to appoint a new Mayor Pro Tem, or see if that does indeed occur and then choose one at the meeting? It's only a couple of weeks, so it's really up to you how you'd like to do that. Because there's, with some changes I found out today, there's a possibility, actually, I may not even go for my training, so the situation may not even arise, but it may, and it could be at a meeting like next week, if we were both gone. So you could choose someone now to be the Mayor Pro Tem for the rest of this term until December 31st, or if there is a meeting and neither I or Councilman Satterthwaite are here, you could choose a Mayor Pro Tem for that night. So I'm open to whatever way you would like to go on this, Council, if you have a recommendation or a strong feeling how you'd like to go, to just make sure we have a Mayor Pro Tem for the rest of this year.
I kind of have always wanted Cheryl to be the Mayor Pro Tem.
I second that.
Is that a motion, Councilman Uri?
Yes, that's a
You got a
motion.
second.
All opposed?
Okay, so
We got 3 votes down here.
So we have a motion and a second then to appoint Councilwoman Stoker as the Mayor Pro Tem for the remainder of this council's term ending on December 31st, 2017. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll start the vote. We're back to Councilwoman Stoker.
I should say no. Yes.
Councilman Uri,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
and Councilman Turner.
Heck, yes.
Okay. Sounds good. So we've got that, and then, of course, in January, we'll welcome our new council members and do
Short
that
meetings,
again.
right, Cheryl?
Okay, that brings us back then to public comments. If there's anything anyone would like to share with the council, we invite you forward at this time. Okay, seeing none, let's do our staff comments. Evan, thank you for coming and going through our budget. Do you have anything else you'd like to share? Okay, thank you. Great job. John?
Just a reminder, you're probably going to bring it up, but the lighting ceremony, the tree lighting ceremony is the 3rd?
Saturday, this
Saturday.
Yep. At 5?
So, yeah, just those of you who are going to come. So that's the December 2nd at 5 over at Bicentennial Park.
Councilman Uri will be doing the lighting, so.
I purchased a new Bic lighter this week, too.
Okay. Also, hope everyone saw the reminder about the Christmas party, so everyone got that on your schedule. Anything else, Sean?
No, not that I can.
Okay, thank you. Let's start. Councilwoman Stoker?
No.
Councilman Uri?
Are you going to have agenda for me for Saturday night?
Yes.
Okay. Now, we just talked about towing, and we just talked about trailers. There's a home, it's a 3rd home south of me that has had a tent trailer parked in front of its house all summer long, and it's still there. And somebody needs to talk to them and move it. If Andra was still our person, she would have been there by now, because she lives 2 doors away from it. But it's I think especially if we get a snowstorm, that's going to be a dangerous place for that tent trailer to be parked.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Councilman Swanson?
2 quick items. One, the restriping on 3100 is wonderful during the day, confusing and disorienting at night, because the striping that was covered shows through whatever material was used to cover it. So I would encourage you tonight, in fact, if you're going home, turn right off of Washington here, and then just drive the length of 3100 towards Bates, you get to where you have all the lines that were covered. The reflective material is showing through whatever they covered it with, and so it's pretty hard to distinguish where the lane lines are.
Okay, let's talk about that in staff meeting Thursday.
And then the other one is our favorite front yard decoration on 750, just south of 3100. Any update on that?
Yes.
And I use decoration in air quotes. It's the abandoned vehicle permanently parked without tires on the ground in the front yard.
So I've done some research and have started drafting a memo.
Okay.
I think it's probably better to give it to you in memo form, but the short answer is, and don't share this with your friends who want to push us. As soon as someone says I'm expressing myself, then First Amendment protections come into play, and it becomes more problematic. So we might need to carefully craft an ordinance that might not allow us to get rid of it, but might allow us to require any fluid and engines and things like that be taken out.
So with what you're saying, then theoretically, if anybody feels like that a junkyard of abandoned vehicles in front of their house on their lawn, as long as it doesn't pose an environmental hazard, can be considered a First Amendment expression of art, and therefore we could have anything that anybody wants throughout anywhere in the city.
Yes.
Ludicrous.
It's the First Amendment. The case law has been all over the board. Utah hasn't had a recent decision on it that is close enough to the point. The best examples are people who actually put paintings in their front yard or sculptures and have been fighting with the cities, and usually the painting or the sculpture wins. And so those individuals, they actually put flowers in it and stuff and do some things. So we've focused with them on trying to follow up with them to keep it mowed, and they've been better than they were a couple of years ago. But it still is it's a process to stay on top of it.
So could that be applied then to anything a homeowner wanted to do in their yard? I want to let all the natural noxious weeds that are natural to North Ogden grow in my front yard as my expression of my love for the nature, the natural state of North Ogden.
Why are you giving people ideas?
I'm just pointing out how ludicrous this is, that basically it allows you to do anything you want to.
It gives you a lot more leeway.
Out there.
It does. And so what the way that the First Amendment or the legislation or the way the court decisions say that if there's a First Amendment impact, then the ordinance has to be narrowly tailored to only eliminate the negative impacts. And so when it comes to sculpture and things like that, they've typically said, what's the negative impact? Right. If it's art, if it's noxious weeds, the few cases, I haven't delved into those a lot, but they seem to imply if it's on like the state noxious weed list, you can require those be removed, but you might have to let them leave their buffalo grass or whatever else and just let it grow. So it's been a problematic constitutional provision for cities and code enforcement for about 30 or 40 years is when the cases started coming up. So it's a problem.
Well, there's
okay then.
There's people that are getting their cars stolen out of their driveways. I imagine somebody like that could get their car stolen out of their front yard. I'm not suggesting I would do it. But
why are you giving people ideas?
Okay.
Anything else, Councilman Swanson?
No.
Okay, Councilman Turner.
So before I make any comments, I got to give a shout out to Tim. He's just texted me, told me he's watching us online. So, hey, Tim. I was wondering if Evan could go through the finance report just one more time. No, thank you, Evan. I appreciate what you do, and I appreciate Jim's accounting bores me to tears, and so I just appreciate what you guys do because I just don't get it. Last week I mentioned that the youth city council was was out doing purchasing some dinners for some needy families, and the report I got from the youth, that's one of their favorite activities, to help out those. And just one other thing too is they are last few years they've been collecting for Youth Futures, I think is the name of it, of the it's a homeless shelter for youth in Ogden here, and they've been going to Smith's and collecting cans and canned goods and stuff and neat coats and things like that for them. But this year they're not doing it at Smith's, but they do have a drop box here at the city offices. So just encourage people to participate in that and help with that. It does go to a good cause. So and that's all I got.
Okay, thank you. And I don't have anything else to add.
Well,
So,
Mayor, how's that deal going on over here at the old Public Works building?
the Family Promise,
Yeah. How's that
it's
going?
doing really well. We got a great report from the first month, and it was a success. It's worked well with our staff. We've got a good feedback from Dave and Public Works, so no problems arose or concerns. So it's.
Do we have a family in there now or not?
I don't know this week particularly because we only do 1 week a month, but there was one this month, and then there'll be one next month. So I don't know which week for sure it is.
And it's several families going at a time. So they'll have like 4 families because they've got 4 separate rooms set up for families, and they use it for a week and then they come back a month, as opposed to having someone there all the time. So.
But they sent a very nice email that it was a success, and thank you. I'll forward that to you.
Good.
Okay, anything else? Or a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. We're adjourned. Thank you.
I am just kind of disappointed. We didn't have any comments from Robert tonight.
Right, I was lazy this time.
Yep, you didn't even comment. I tell you what, you're losing your touch, that's all I can say.
I like these meetings and when you get out this time, so.
I'll let you know.
Last week was better, but this time